Let me guess. You've been thinking about next year, what you want, what needs to change, the conversations you should have, the opportunities you might pursue. But instead of clarity, you are spiraling. Your brain is running 14 tabs at once. Your confidence feels shaky. Every decision suddenly feels high stakes. And if you're honest, you're also too exhausted to even think about next year. You're depleted, stretched, carrying the mental load of leadership, and it feels impossible to get enough distance to make a clear, confident call about anything right now. This is the year-end fog, the perfect mix of overthinking, burnout, and pressure that convinced you to push everything to January because the holidays are coming, because you're tired, because your brain is sliding into survival mode, because telling yourself, I'll deal with it next year, feels easier than sitting with the discomfort of uncertainty today. But here's the thing nobody's telling you. Pushing decisions into January doesn't create clarity, it creates urgency. It makes your start of the year with pressure instead of intention. It turns small questions into big ones because you've lost your window to prepare. And the truth is, taking just a few moments right now before the holidays, before the overwhelm really sets in, is actually one of the most powerful ways to step away from burnout and set up a calmer, more grounded 2026. Not hours, not a full planning session, just a moment. A moment to pause the spiral, a moment to quiet the inner critic, a moment to activate the part of your brain that leads, decides, and creates, instead of the part that catastrophizes, second guesses, and shuts down. This is the heart of today's episode of Leading Women in Tech. Because if you want to stop overthinking at work, if you want a decision-making clarity as a leader, if you want your executive presence and your executive mindset to feel grounded instead of frantic, it starts here with self-coaching techniques for leaders that help you interrupt the swirl. With leadership mindset shifts designed for you as a high performer. And I mean you. You are exhausted, so it's time to shift. And executive mindset tools which you can use when your inner critic is driving the bus instead of you. With the foundations of leadership, resilience, and burnout recovery, we're going to talk about why your inner critic is loudest at the end of the year, what's actually happening in your brain when you spiral, how to coach yourself towards clarity, even when you're tired, overextended, and tempted to shove everything into January. This is your moment to reset your thinking before the holidays, so you can actually rest and walk into 2026 with the confidence and clarity you've been craving. So if you're ready to shift out of mental overload into a calmer, more strategic leadership mindset, let's dig in. Before we go any further, I need to clear something up. You are not struggling because you're too emotional, not confident enough, indecisive, or not cut out for leadership. You're struggling because your inner critic, the mental pattern that has kept you safe earlier in your career, is now running your leadership. And at the end of the year, it gets loud. It gets loud exactly when you're tired, you're overextended, you're carrying too many decisions, you're responsible for too many people, you're not giving enough space to think, and you hit moments of transition and uncertainty, which is why the end of the year is peak inner critic season. It's peak exhaustion season, but definitely peak inner critic season as well. Because depending on who you are, whether you are overextended and operating at over 100% capacity, or focus on proving your ground or the only woman in the room, your brain is doing one of three things. If you're over-functioning out of habit, you've always solved everything by doing more. Doing more used to keep you safe, respected, valued, but now it's the thing burning you out and blocking your ability to think strategically, particularly right now at this time of year. If instead you are second guessing because your brain is wired for self-protection, every time you try to plan for the next year, your mind generates 12 competing outcomes, and a list of everything that could go wrong. That's not insecurity. It's a pattern of thought rehearsed over years of proving yourself. Or the third way this tends to go. You're feeling the weight of being the only. If you're the only woman in the room or the only senior woman in your organization, your brain is constantly calculating risk, perception, and consequences. This isn't overthinking. It's leadership under a self-imposed microscope. Whichever of these is holding you back, your internal narrative is no longer serving you. And here's what you need to realize. Your inner critic, that internal dialogue, is not a personality flaw. It's an outdated operating system. It's the mental script your brain wrote for you back when you were learning how to operate in this world as a woman in a tech company. The goal was to survive, fit in, avoid judgment. Back when your career depended on being competent, quiet, dependable, agreeable, precise, or prepared. The script worked when you were an IC. It worked when you were early in your leadership career. It even works when you start taking on bigger responsibilities. But the problem is this. Your brain is still running the individual contributor version of you, while your career now requires the executive version of you. This is where a leadership mindset shift becomes not just a nice to have, but essential. This is why executive mindset tools really matter. And this is why thought framing is non-negotiable. And this is why self-coaching techniques, like we're going to talk about in just a moment, are so powerful. Because as you rise, your thinking needs to rise too. The level of thinking that got you here cannot take you into 2026 with clarity and without burnout. Right now, your brain is doing what we've all trained our brains to do at the year end. It's defaulting to fear-based, scarcity-based, risk-averse decision-making. But here's the heart of it. You are not the problem. Your patterns are. And patterns are just in our brain. They can be rewritten. And this episode is about teaching you how. So let's talk about why your inner critic gets so loud at the end of the year, especially when you're tired, especially when you're leading at a high level. Because once you understand what's happening inside your brain, you can stop personalizing it and making it all about you. You stop making it mean something about your capability, your confidence, your leadership, and you can finally start using executive mindset tools that actually work. So here's what's going on beneath the surface. Firstly, your brain is trying to protect you, not sabotage you. Be kind to your brain. That inner critic, it's not the voice of truth, but it is the voice of safety. It's the part of your brain, specifically the amygdala, for those of you geeking out here, that's been trained to scan for risk, social rejection, uncertainty, anything that might feel uncomfortable or unfamiliar. When you start thinking about next year, planning career moves, imagining a promotion, or making decisions that matter, your brain goes, wait, hold on. This feels risky, scary. I don't want to. Let me warn you about everything that could possibly go wrong so you don't get hurt. And this is why thought reframing for executives is so powerful. You're not fighting with yourself. You're soothing your protection system that's a little bit outdated because it learned those techniques early in your career. The second thing that's going on is how overthinking is actually a survival strategy, particularly if you're a high performer. If you are a high achiever, your brain has spent years equating success with predicting every outcome. That was me. Preparing for everything. Yeah, that's me too. Avoiding mistakes, staying ahead of expectations, anticipating other people's reactions. And can I just say that one is great executive presence, but then you're trying to control all the uncertainty. It's maybe helped you excel at earlier stages in your career. And there's certainly elements of it that I say even top CEOs should be doing. But it's not necessarily a high performance habit that's going to keep you safe and successful. Now you're a leader, you need to be decisive, have clarity, emotional regulation, the ability to operate without full information. And if you're focused on anticipation, prediction, and that to the exclusion of all else, your brain is misfiring. This is why year-end thinking feels so overwhelming. You're using IC level thinking and allowing it to dominate to solve executive level problems. Yes, you do need to anticipate, but you need decisiveness and clarity and emotional regulation more than that. And the third thing that's going on is when burnout is amplifying any inner critic. So I have a lot of clients who we've dealt with their inner critic. It feels good. I've done this. Year end comes around, we're feeling depleted, stretched, in burnout recovery potentially, and suddenly it all becomes a bit too much. What's going on? Well, you've got a lot going on, and your amygdala, that emotional fear-driven part, becomes louder when you've got a lot going on. So right when you need your leadership mindset shifts, your brain is defaulting to survival mode because you are tired, you're exhausted. There's so much going on because you are depleted. And that's why small decisions feel huge. You can't tell what you want. Everything feels high stakes. Clarity feels something amorphous that's never going to come your way. Confidence feels incredibly fragile. And you just don't trust your own thinking. And we tend to tell ourselves, I'm too tired, I'm going to wait for the new year. It isn't a leadership weakness, this. What's going on is your neurology is under strain. And if you understand this, it gives you power, because what's really going on is you're tired and depleted, and your brain's just bringing back that inner critic because you haven't got the rational and emotional control because we haven't fully dealt with it. You can lead yourself effectively if you understand what you're working with, though. The fourth thing that's going on is how you're operating at overcapacity. When this happens, your brain is drowning in details, tasks, responsibilities. If you're focused on constantly proving yourself, your brain is wired for self-surveillance, anticipating critique. Does that sound familiar? You're looking for somebody to tell you that you're bad? If you're the only woman in the room or one of just a few, or you feel different in any way, your brain is managing visibility, perception, consequence, and representation. And then you add end-of-year reviews, budget conversations, promotion cycles, performance narratives, strategic planning, team morale, holiday emotional load. I can keep going. The pressure to end strong. Of course, your inner critic is going to be overwhelmingly loud. Of course, your brain is just going to be overwhelmed. And of course, clarity feels almost impossible. This is the mental load of leadership. And acknowledging it doesn't make you weak, it makes you accurate. This is why self-coaching techniques are non-negotiable for us, because we need the tools to work with our brain, not against it. Okay, the fifth thing I want to go through that's going on is, as we approach this season, if we approach with the same mindset that created the overwhelm, you will start next year exactly the same way. But even if you take just tiny small steps to create decision-making clarity now, if you interrupt that inner critic loop, if you use mindset tools to regulate and reframe, if you allow yourself to just get a few degrees more grounded, you will enter the holidays with space instead of stress, and enter January with clarity instead of panic, entering 2026 with intention instead of spiraling. And that's what I want for you. This isn't about confidence, it's about clarity, it's about leadership resilience. It's about rewiring the internal operating system of your brain that has been quietly running your decisions for years. Because once you understand why your mind does what it does, you have the power to change it. So now you understand what's going on and why things are getting loud and uncomfortable and overwhelming. Let's talk about how to shift, how to coach yourself through this, how to interrupt the spiral, how to create clarity when your brain is overwhelmed. End of year coaching, end of year self-coaching is what I want to call this. This is about how to make leadership decisions without second guessing every step, because this is where most of us get stuck. We understand the problem. We understand the pattern. We recognize that things are spiraling. We know we're exhausted, but we don't yet have the tools to shift our thinking in real time. So these are the tools. I'm going to take you through 3 tools that I teach every single one of my clients. Self-coaching techniques that I get my clients to use between coaching sessions. They're based on the real techniques I use in coaching. And it's about moving through the fear into grounded clarity. So let's walk through these one by one. First of all, tool number 1, the neutral question reset. Use this one for immediate calming, clarity when overthinking takes over. And by all means, like all 3 of these all year round, by the way. But I want you to practice them as we're going to the holidays. When your brain is spinning, panicking, predicting, over-processing, you can't think strategically, you can't decide clearly, you're struggling with evaluating options. The goal isn't to be more confident. The goal is to neutralize your brain first. So by neutralize your brain, I want you to work on the prefrontal cortex. that executive decision-making piece, so it can come back online and be more logical and rational for you. So here's how this works. First of all, pause and ask, what's the actual problem I'm trying to solve? Most overthinking happens because your brain is trying to solve 10 hypothetical problems at once. Naming the real question trims 90% of the noise away. And bonus points if you speak this out loud. If you ask your question out loud and then you answer it out loud or write it down, doesn't matter, out loud or write it down, because that slows your brain and focuses it on the one thing instead of allowing the 10 plus thoughts to continue spiraling, because you're not slowing your brain down, you're just thinking, okay? Step 2, ask yourself, what's the simplest next step here? Not the perfect one, the simplest one. Perfectionism is gasoline for the inner critic. Simplicity is the reset. So what's the simplest next step here? And then step 3, ask yourself, what would I advise my best friend here? I love this question because we're so much kinder to our friends than to ourselves. This instantly shifts you into a leadership mindset, perspective, clarity, objectivity, instead of survival mode. This alone can transform your mental load. As I said, bonus points for doing all of that out loud or written down so you're not just thinking in your head. That is the worst place to do this because you're going to continue spiraling and thinking about 10 things at once. Okay, the second tool, the thought ladder reframe. This is my top method to shift from fear-based thinking through to grounded thinking so that you can get executive clarity. A lot of mindset advice tells you to just think more positively or stop being so pessimistic. The most frustrating one I experienced was a lot of, stop worrying about that. Honestly, I wanted to scream when people said this to me because it wasn't like I wanted to be worrying. If I knew where the off switch was, I would have used it. So we know none of that works. Why? Because your brain won't jump directly from, I'm not sure I'm doing this right, to, I'm absolutely brilliant and unstoppable. That's too big a leap. It hits what I call, excuse my language, the BS filter. Your brain just goes, BS, I'm not believing that. It's too big a leap. Your nervous system won't believe it. The thought ladder is a mindset shift that helps you take one tiny baby step at a time. Step 1, identify the fear-based thought. For example, I'm going to make the wrong decision. Step 2, move one baby step up the ladder to a neutral thought. For example, I don't know the outcome yet, but I can evaluate it. Then step 3, move to a grounded thought. For example, I can gather the information I need. And then finally, you move to an executive thought. I have the capacity and experience to make this call. This process is about rewiring your inner critic over time. It doesn't silence the voice, it shrinks its power. This is thought reframing that executives do every day. It's not fluffy, it's not abstract, it's strategic, it is evidence-based because you're literally saying, what can I do? And this is used by psychiatrists around the world. It's cognitive behavioral therapy right here in a self-coaching talk for you, right? Again, bonus points if you write this down. And when the items are big, those are the ones to take to a coach, by the way. Essentially, coaching sessions can take you through this process, but from bigger issues moving forward even faster. But the thought ladder is a great process when you don't have your coach to hand. If you have a coach, make sure they're aware of this process. They should be. If you're after a coach, then, well, we should talk. But let's move on to the third tool. The third tool is the executive decision filter. This one is for those of you who are decisive, wanting to make strategic choices, but you're tired. So when you're burned out, your brain will treat every decision as equally urgent and equally risky. But thought leadership requires prioritization. It requires distinguishing between the decisions that need deep thought and the ones that need simple, clear, calm choice. So here's the filter I teach. Question 1. Is this decision reversible? If yes, choose quickly, don't spiral. Question 2. Does this decision impact my long-term leadership or career clarity? If yes, slow down, get intentional. This is where executive thinking is needed. Question 3. What are the 2 to 3 most important criteria here? Not 12, not 50, not all the things. 2 to 3. And the fourth and final question. Am I making this choice from fear or clarity? If fear, then go back to the neutral reset. Use that tool. If it's clarity, trust yourself and move forward. Just asking those 4 questions, right? Is this reversible? Does it impact long term? What are the 2 to 3 most important criteria? Am I making this for fear or clarity? That alone reduces 80% of unnecessary overthinking. It's a great way to go, I don't actually need to think about this a huge amount, and give yourself immediate permission to stop overthinking, or identify I'm overthinking and I need a tool, or realize, hey, this does require more thought, and legitimately giving it the space. The problem when we overthink all the time, we're overfunctioning, is we aren't able to discern what does and doesn't need our intense energy. I see one of 2 things happening. I see either we overthink everything, we're overwhelmed, we're overfunctioning, or we overthink very little. And that one tends to happen at the point where you're about to give up. When you stop doing all the thinking. It happens more in men than in women, my experience. I think that's a generalization, but my general experience is that it seems to happen more in men, that they just give up thinking. But this is a really important one, because there are things that need your brain power. Of course they do. But when we're overthinking everything, we're not clear about where our attention should go. This is essential as you head to the end of the year to get your mindset in the right place. Trust yourself. Trust your ability to ask those 4 questions and figure out where to use your limited brain power, because you do need sleep. You do have limited time. Use it in the right way rather than going on everything or on nothing. These tools, though, all 3 of them have a very similar focus. They don't require you to feel confident. They help you create clarity first. Clarity in what to do next. Clarity in how to interact with your own brain. Confidence comes later. None of these tools require hours of reflection. They work in the moment, even when you're exhausted. And most important of all, they shift you from reacting like the overwhelmed version of you to the leading like the grounded, strategic, 2026 ready version of you. This is leadership resilience training in real time. It's sustainable leadership strategy, and it's the inner rewiring that makes everything else easier. So let's talk about one of the biggest misunderstandings in women's leadership development. As you know, I'm a women's leadership expert, and one of the things that really gets under my skin, which is really prevalent right now, is this idea that you just need more confidence. Let me explain. Most of the women who come to me say some version of, I just wish I felt more confident, or I'd go for that promotion if I felt more sure of myself, or I'd make the decisions, I just don't trust my instincts. Sometimes they'll be confident in one area but not another, but more often than not, there's a lack of confidence somewhere. But here's the truth. You do not have a confidence problem. You have a clarity problem that your brain is mislabeling as a confidence problem. When you try to fix your confidence without fixing your clarity, it keeps you stuck in the same spiral. Overthinking, hesitation, perfectionism, second guessing, procrastination, self-doubt. I could go on. So let's talk about this a little bit more. Confidence is a feeling where clarity is a function. So what does confidence depend on? Well, it depends on energy, rest. So you're getting a pattern here about what's missing at this time of year. Emotional regulation, because they come from energy and rest. Safety, recent wins, the absence of threats. Confidence requires all of that, and experience. Clarity requires information, structure, framing, prioritization, boundaries, and an ability to have internal decision making. Confidence fluctuates constantly, which is why we're relying on it to make decisions. It is an unreliable process. But clarity is a stable state, which is why executives rely on process, not emotional states. Emotional states are their ability to show up and have emotional regulation that's required to lead in that way, but process allows them to make decisions even on a bad day. And this is one of the biggest mindset shifts you can make, is recognizing confidence and clarity are not the same thing, and you likely don't actually have a confidence problem. You have a clarity problem that's stopping you taking action. Okay, number 2, the inner critic in you gets loud when clarity is missing, not when confidence is missing. We call it lack of confidence, but let me just explain. Your brain hates uncertainty. Your brain interprets unknowns as potential danger. So whenever you face a decision without clarity, your inner critic fills the gap with things like, what if you're wrong? What if you fail? What if this is a mistake? What if people think you're not ready? What if you mess this up? What if you look foolish? It's not self-doubt. It's your brain saying, stay here. This is scary. Don't like it. Stay put. Don't do anything different. It's why thought reframing for executives works so well, because it gives you the brain anchor that you need to say, hold on, I'm okay. Self-coaching in this situation allows us to get clarity by getting away from threats. Okay, number 3, confident leaders aren't more talented. They're clearer with what's going on. So yes, clarity again. Here's something I wish every woman in tech knew. The confident leaders you admire so much, they're not confident because they're fearless. They're confident because they're clear about their priorities, clear about their decision-making criteria, clear about what is reversible, what is not reversible. Remember what I talked about at the beginning? Clear about the outcome they're diving towards, clear about what matters and what doesn't, clear about their values, clear about their boundaries, clear about the level they're meant to be operating at. Confidence comes from that clarity, not the other way around. It's executive mindset work. It's leadership resilience. It's sustainable leadership. It's all clarity work. And then the final piece here. When you build clarity, confidence stops being something you have to chase. Clarity tells your brain there is a process, there's a plan, I know what I'm doing. Confidence becomes a natural byproduct, not a prerequisite. This is why all the positive thinking in the world, you could do all day going, hey, you're great. You know what you're doing, Tony, but it does not fix the clarity gap. You can't affirm your way out of uncertainty. Affirmations are great, but they only work to a point. I'm a big believer in them, but they won't get you all the way because they do not provide clarity. When you use tools such as the ladder reframe, the neutral question reset, the decision filter, your brain can stop panicking. Your nervous system will calm down. You sharpen your thinking. Your options start making sense. And suddenly you have access to leadership intelligence again. Because when you're panicking, your IQ literally drops. We need you to stop panicking so your leadership intelligence goes up and you can make better decisions. When you feel calm because you're grounded, it gives you clarity, and clarity then becomes confidence. And the clarity is what's going to carry you well into next year, not confidence. Confidence comes because of clarity, so you need clarity first. As you think about next year, your career, your goals, your growth, your team, your next big step, your boundaries, your opportunities, all the things, you do not need to feel bold and fearless already. And if that's what's missing, and therefore you're saying, you know what, I'm just going to heads down to the holidays, going to worry about it next year. And you kind of know you're stacking up a problem. If that's what's going on, let me just be clear with you. Clarity is what fuels momentum. Clarity is what reduces burnout. Clarity is what quiets that inner critic that is maybe getting a little out of control right now. Clarity is what creates executive presence. Clarity is what makes you decisive instead of doubtful. Clarity is what gives you the courage to actually act. And it's going to allow you to sleep and enjoy the holidays and set you up with a foundation for 2026. When you start operating from clarity instead of fear, everything in your leadership shifts, from decisions, your energy, that confidence, your ability to influence others, your sense of control. Clarity is how you stop spiraling, and clarity is how you make sure you get unstuck. It's time to act with authority, and it's time to step into that next version of yourself because you come from a place of clarity. Now that you understand your inner critic, now that you started to shift your thinking, now you're learning how to create clarity instead of chasing confidence, I want you to do something bigger. Because the goal of this mindset episode isn't just to quiet the swell and enjoy the holidays, which is really, really important, don't get me wrong. But it's also to help you stop overthinking at work and make decisions without spiraling. It's not just to help you feel grounded. The real purpose of this conversation is to lay foundations for the version of yourself you want to be as you head into next year. This is the beginning of a new mindset for you, right? For me, Mindset Tony 2026 is a different Tony from 2025. The internal rewiring that we're going to work on that lets you walk into next year at the clearest, the calmest, being the most strategic version of you. And to do that, you need to begin imagining her, future you. Not planning for her yet, but that comes, we're going to do that first episode of 2026, by the way. we are going to do a full planning episode. So we're not mapping out her goals yet. We'll do that together with structure, process. We'll dig into all the things. We're not sketching your whole career map yet. That will come once you have clarity. Right now, the work is our identities, our mindset, our internal alignment, because strategy without mindset is just pressure, and I'm not here for that. I'm here for an easy end of the year, and I want you to enjoy the end of the year rather than with guilt or with fear or with burnout. So let's start that work right here. It's not hard work. This is just going to make you feel good as we wrap out the year, so you walk into next year being the kick-ass leader that you know you want to be. So, first question for you. Who is the 2026 version of you as leader? Take a paper and pen. Let's write this down. Think about her for a moment. 2026 you. How does she make decisions? How does she communicate? What does it look like? How does she no longer second guess herself? What does she say yes to and what does she say no to? How does she hold boundaries? How does she lead in meetings? How does she show up under stress? How does the self-coach come up in her when something goes sideways? This is the clarity I want you to have at the identity level, your deeper self. Let's shift deeply, because before you can plan next year, you need to know who you want to be next year. Question number 2, what emotional states define you next year? If you imagine yourself at your most strategic, most grounded, most powerful, what words come to mind? Again, let's write these down. Is it calm, decisive, focused, present, boundary-led, intentional, influential, unshakable, clear? None of those are personality traits. They're results of a shift in your brain, the kind that you're going to make right now. As we've just discussed today, this is the work that's going to get you to believing in those words, okay? Question number 3. What does she no longer tolerate? 2026 version of you, what does she no longer tolerate? Here's some of the clearest predictions of transformation. Who you become next year is shaped as much by what you stop doing as what you start doing. So ask yourself, what does 2026 you refuse to carry anymore? What mental load is she done with? What inner critic stories does she no longer believe? What boundaries does she have in place? What leadership style does she no longer contort herself into? Who's she being? What's authentic to her? What expectations does she release? This is sustainable leadership. And I want you to evolve into this version of you. Question number 4. What is one shift you can make this year that future you will thank you for? This one matters hugely because you don't need a full vision or a full plan today. As I said, we're going to map that out next year. You don't need this entire map, right, to wrap up the year. What we need is to feel good about who you are so you're not overwhelmed, overfunctioning and burning out. And that you are going into the holidays with the mindset you want for next year. You do not need OKRs. You don't need promotion targets. Well, if you have them, that's fine. Write them down. But right now, what you need is a shift. You need just one shift, one baby step, one boundary, one belief that you're going to release this year as the year ends, one habit you're going to let go of, one story you can stop repeating, one upgrade in your mindset, one calm decision, one shift towards clarity. Give yourself a moment, pauses if you need to. What is one intentional shift you're going to make? A tiny upgrade, compound moment. That is the foundation for next year. One shift. Because if you go into the year end shifted, you are going to restore yourself and you're going to allow yourself to plan for next year, which we're going to do in January, with this clearest, strongest, most grounded version of you, not the burned out December version of you. The mindset work is not the plan, it's the prerequisite for the plan. It's so cliche, but it's so true. Okay, question number 5, or rather statement number 5. You're not planning next year yet. You're preparing the leader who will. That's the entire point of everything I've talked about today. This is inner listening work instead of inner critic work. This is self-coaching instead of self-doubting. I want you to have clarity instead of spiraling, and identity before strategy. Because if you try and set goals from exhaustion, from fear, from pressure, you are going to keep repeating those patterns. So I know many of you are setting goals at work right now. Give yourself permission to hold off on the personal goals until next year. I was used to goal setting with clients in this community at the end of the year. And I realized we're all overloaded. We don't have the mental spaciousness. So this episode is about quieting your inner critic, reframing your thoughts, grounding yourselves so that next year is radically different. Now is not the time to push harder. Now is not the time to be thinking differently. Now is not the time to focus on confidence. Now is the time to ground yourself so you can do those things. Give yourself the holiday you need so you come back clearer with the foundation you need for next year. If you're building it right now, you'll go into the holidays and come out refreshed. If you focus yourself on planning for next year, maybe you're going after promotion, maybe you're going to go after a new job, you're just more likely to have a plan that's not fully aligned and not have those boundaries in place. So as you sit with all of this, those patterns we've talked about, the thought spirals, the clarity tools, I want to offer you something that most women don't give themselves. A moment of honesty, a moment to acknowledge that you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to keep white knuckling your way through decisions. You don't have to keep fighting your thoughts in the dark. You don't have to keep walking into every year exhausted and hoping for clarity that's never going to appear out of magic thin air. You are a leader and you're also a human being with a brain wired for protection, not performance. Because under stress, that's what we are hardwired to do. But I know you're capable of performance because otherwise you probably wouldn't be listening to this. So here's what I want you to know. When your mindset shifts, your entire career trajectory will shift too. Because clarity gets easier, decisions get faster. Everything inside that's swirling can get quieter. Your presence, your executive presence becomes stronger because your confidence shows and you're stable instead of conditional. Your career becomes intentional instead of reactive. This work, this inner rewiring, is about becoming somebody new for next year. It's about accessing the version of you that's already here underneath the burnout, the noise, the overthinking. And if you're listening to this feeling, that tug, that moment of, yes, this is exactly what I need going into 2026, then this is the perfect moment to get support. Because this season, as we draw to an end, but right here, right now, before the year ends, is when your brain is the most overloaded and the least resourced. It's the time to do the groundwork to make the largest difference in how you show up next year. So if you're ready to do this work, think more clearly, make decisions without spiraling, sleep well at night, and step into the executive version of yourself that thinks clearly, sleeps well, makes great decisions, and still has time for her family, I would be honored to support you. Whether you're preparing for a promotion, navigating recovery, planning a transition, redesign your role, or simply trying to keep your head above the water. This work changes everything. And so here's your invitation from me. Book a free leadership strategy conversation with me. I want to walk you through what's coming up for you, where you're getting stuck, what you need to feel grounded and clear heading into next year. No pressure, no obligation, just space, clarity, and support. You do not need to wait for January. In fact, I'd argue this work is the final piece of work for this year. Now is your moment. So go to tonycollis.com/let's-chat or head to the show notes to grab that link. You definitely don't need to wait until you feel ready. Clarity comes after the action. Clarity comes from the action. Next level you is not about trying harder. It's about thinking differently. And if you're already on your way, I applaud you. Either way, I will see you in the next episode as we wrap up 2025.